Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Balance Our Hustle Live, where we grow, create, and enjoy success together. I am your host, Miss Ashley ESQ, and today we will be discussing women in ethics with our very special guest, Miss Marcy Maslov. Miss Marcy is best known for her invention of an ethics game, which is entitled E Factor. She is been a employee of several Fortune 500 companies. She is a speaker, she's an accountant, and also she is one of my very cherished mentors. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Miss Marcy.
Hi, Miss Ashley. Hi,
All
Miss
right.
Ashley. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being one of our guests. Definitely great to have you on. Um, so I think, and I know, as you know, we meet all the time in a capacity as a mentee mentor relationship, and I learn so much about you each and every single time we meet. And I know there's so much that I just left out of your bio. You are incredible, very well seasoned, and a lot of experience and a lot to offer everyone. Um, Part of what I've learned about you is that, your experience in working with corporate, including Fortune 500 companies, as a woman in corporate America, you've grown up almost in corporate America for years. And a lot of your experience came from your experience growing up in corporate America. One quick question I want to start off. What were your goals growing up?
Oh, that takes me back a long time. When I was 12, I actually sat down and wrote my 5 goals for my life, believe it
Okay.
or not. And the first one was to live in a foreign country. The
Okay.
second one was to go to college and graduate. The third one was to become a CPA.
Okay.
The fourth one was to buy my own house.
Okay.
And the fifth one, I'm trying to remember. It was so long ago, I can't even remember what the fifth one was, but it all had to do. Oh, I know. It was to get a master's degree.
Okay.
So those were my initial goals growing up. And nobody would deter me from that. I was like focused from the time I was 12 years old. And by the time I was 39, I believe I'd accomplished all of them.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. No, that is
Yep.
great. I love to hear stories like that when you can identify what you want in an early age. It definitely helps.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I came upon being an accountant. It was kind of a silly thing, but one of my best friends when I was a young girl, her father was an accountant, and he would come home every night with a really cool little briefcase. And my dad owned a junkyard, and he came home smelling it like the junkyard. And so I wanted to be like my friend who had the briefcase.
so you pick the briefcase over a sweaty day,
I
right?
did it
That's
exactly
air
right.
conditioned
Yes.
office. Right, right. Wow, that is awesome. I know I don't want to jump too fast into everything because I know there's so much for us to just peel back in layers. You have so much great experience. Um, because I know it hasn't in your experience in working, right? I know I've learned so much about you. I know it hasn't always been roses in corporate America as a woman. Um, we know what we experience today, and I know a lot of you guys in the audience know some of the things that we experience today in corporate, but to talk to someone that's seasoned, that has so much experience as yourself, you realize some of the same stuff that we're experiencing today has been happening, right? It just didn't start with us. It's, you know, dates 20, 30 years back from like when you first entered the industry as a professional woman. So super experience, super interesting because while we talk about progress and how much progress that we've had, there's still a lot of progress to come. Um, so my next question for you, Miss Marcy, is what was it like when you first started working?
So I graduated in the early 80s from university, and that the year that I graduated was like chaos. It was huge recession. It was inflation rates were, skyrocketing, interest rates were skyrocketing. Only a handful of people got jobs straight out of college.
Okay.
That part is actually kind of similar to what we've experienced through the whole COVID period. But what's different then from today is when I graduated, there were very, very few women professionals in any level of management. So when I entered the corporate world, I entered as an accountant, taking my CPA exam at the time, learning the profession, but I was still viewed as, because I was female, I was still not viewed as an equal, and I still was not viewed as making the same pay as my male counterparts, even though many times in the beginning I was training my bosses for some of the jobs that I was skilled for. So the early days of my corporate existence were really about me learning what the corporate life was like, how to be a professional, watching my bosses, trying to get myself on the teams, building credibility and building reputation. And it really was not easy. I remember my first corporate meeting. We had all of the controllers coming in from all around the world. My job in the beginning, I worked my way all the way up, Miss Ashley. I started, as an analyst doing the bookkeeping all the way up to senior levels in accounting and finance. And in those early days, like my first corporate meeting with all the controllers, they viewed me as the person to go make the coffee and make the copies. And I don't make coffee really well. Maybe on purpose. Shh, don't tell anybody, but that's kind of how it is. So I had to really work to build respect, and that part is, I think, that part is a little easier in today's world, but it's still, when you get to the highest levels of accounting and finance, you still have to earn that respect. You still have that glass ceiling to crack through, and I worked a lot harder than some of my male counterparts in those early days to build that rapport and to build that mentorship. I went and looked for my own mentors back in those days.
Right.
And I was lucky to find a few. But most people in my international accounting and finance career, it was really hard to find the mentoring, and it was really hard to actually build myself into that management level.
Right, right. Well, that is quite interesting. You mentioned mentors. What was that like, acquiring mentors? I know one of our last guests, um, actually our last two guests, that was one of their key points, key takeaways is the importance of mentorship. And of course, I agree because I see how I've benefited, right, from our relationship and our sessions. But what was it like then acquiring a mentor to help you? Um, as a woman in corporate America, uh,
Mm-hmm.
back in the
I
day.
had to I had to ask. Okay, so I watched the guys naturally gravitate towards the mentors that they felt would help them advance, but I didn't see that same gravitation to me, and so I had to actually evaluate which of the people that I was working with would be the best mentor for me. In one of my earliest jobs, they actually assigned somebody to show me around the ropes and introduce me to all the people. And so that was actually really good. Believe it or not, I think one of my first bosses was a female,
Okay.
and she viewed me as competition.
Oh, yeah.
So she was not the mentor.
Hmm.
So I had to actually just observe a lot and then choose the people in the areas where I really felt like I needed help. In the early days too, I was very quiet and shy. I know that you maybe, because you
Hard to
probably
believe.
find it horrible and hard to believe, but
You really come
I
out the shell, right?
I was very, very quiet and shy. The typical accounting profile, and kind of internal person. But I realized that if I didn't ask for help and if I didn't articulate what it was that I needed to do or needed to get help with, that I would not get that help. And so I learned how to ask questions. I learned how to recognize what my weaknesses were without admitting that I was weak, because in those days, in the early days, it was really it was who had the most power got the most resource. And so
Hmm.
you would never have seen me cry ever in the corporate world. That was just like not happening. Okay. I would have cut off both my arms and both my legs before I started crying. That was like culturally where I was working. That was taboo for us, and talking about your personal life was taboo for us
Mm-hmm.
women in particular. So I had to learn how to be very strong on the outside and compartmentalize my feelings and emotions and focus on the job and focus on asking for help in appropriate ways that would actually get me um, noticed and promoted. It was, it really was kind of an environment, at least for me, where you had to actually almost sell yourself at every stage of your development. And you had to
Mm-hmm.
prove that you had the capability to take on more work and to be professional and to meet the deadlines and to actually represent the organization the way they wanted it to be made, to be represented. And so I had to learn all that. That is not something that I was taught in school anywhere. I had to literally learn by watching, and I sucked up a lot of stuff that in today's world I probably would be more vocal on, and in today's world would not be allowed. Okay, there was a lot of swear words. There was a lot of aggressiveness. There was a lot of competing for position.
Right.
Um, and so I had to learn how to basically manage all of that culture and then still stay true to myself in terms of what I wanted to accomplish for myself.
Wow. No, you mentioned some things that I definitely want to kind of take some time to kind of unfold with you. Asking for help. I think that's really, really big. I think for some people it's easy, but I think for most of us, including myself, asking for help is not necessarily an easy thing to do because asking someone for anything, you always put yourself in a vulnerable place to feel rejected too, because the response could be like, "Oh no, no, sorry, I can't help you," or the answer that you weren't hoping for. So, what advice do you give when asking for help to someone who's in corporate? You identify maybe you know what you need, maybe you don't know what you need, but you know you need help. What
Hmm.
advice would you give to someone in asking for help, and or even give us examples of how you ask for help?
So I think the first thing that we all need to recognize is that asking for help is not an automatic sign of weakness. Okay, that
Mm,
was my first thing that I had to overcome because again, in my corporate world, it was very aggressive. I was in the first couple jobs I was in, I had women supervisors, but then after those first jobs, it was all men. And when I moved into an organization in Raleigh, North Carolina, was the only female. And then, so I had to learn that asking for help was okay, but I also had to identify, I had to learn how to ask the questions in
mm,
such a way that would generate some willingness to help me. So, because, I was dealing with bosses that were very busy. In accounting, we always have deadlines. We always have a million things to do. We're always working a lot of extra work, extra time. And so you have to pick your moment,
right,
to pick the right person. You have to be clear about what it is you need help with. So you can't just go into the boss and say, hey, I need help, because the boss will throw you out, right? You had
mhm,
to kind of create a case, a business case, what I call a business case. You haven't heard all my business case stories yet, but you have to create a business case. Like, here's the problem that I'm facing. Here are the issues that I need resolving, or here's where I see the answer going, but here's the resources that I need help with. And do you have the right person that can connect me with the resources, or do you have some tidbits of guidance on where you think
right,
my direction should be? So you need to be kind of specific in the way that you ask questions. If you just ask a question of the boss and expect the boss to solve that problem, that was where I would get my butt kicked, honestly, because I wasn't, it was viewed as not being prepared. And so I ended up having to um, really learn how to ask questions, and not just yes no questions, by the way. Never a yes no question. It was always, I'm having issues with the following resource. My concern is this. My consequences are this if I don't provide an answer, if I don't resolve this properly. What advice do you have for me? that's the kind of a question you would ask instead of, can you help me? Because if you said that, if you ask that question in particular, I usually would get like that cross-eyed look of, yeah, I'm not helping you right now.
Right, right. No, I think that that's really good advice. One thing that I heard recently, and you just demonstrated how it's done, is it's not necessarily what you say; it's always how you say it, which we've heard, but it's also when you say it. So it's not necessarily asking; it's what you're asking for, how you ask, and when you ask. So being strategic throughout the process of, okay, I'm gonna ask,
Mhm.
the boss is in a good mood in the morning, so let me make sure I get in there before he starts his day, or let me
Yeah.
prepare in how I'm going to present this problem to him so that he can come up with a solution that's favorable to give me the help that I need.
Yes.
And
And I think the thing too, Miss Ashley, was when I was younger, I was very intimidated by all the senior executives, but those were all the people that I was being asked to interact with. So
right,
I'm an analyst, I'm a low level, I'm a new hire growing into my position, having to ask the CFO or the president of the company in some cases
right,
how they want things done. And so that's a very intimidating position to be in to start with, let alone knowing that you don't even know half of what you need to know. So I think that's also part of, how you need to create your own image and reputation, and understand that most people will want to help you if you ask the question in the right way. Even the highest levels in your organization, they're human too.
right, right.
And I just had to overcome all my shyness, all my fear of asking for help, and all of that to be able to ask the folks that had all the power, where they wanted the problems to be solved.
So, one of the things too that definitely I wanted to mention in asking for help is also kind of taking initiative to help make it easy for the person that you are, maybe you need their time, right? Maybe you need something for them. So maybe if there's some research that needs to be done, or maybe you need them to write you a referral for something, possibly even drafting it or doing the research in advance. So then it just makes it super simple to where they can review and sign, or um,
Mm-hmm.
just avoid the steps. Because I think anytime, even for myself, I'm always willing to help, even other attorneys that may just be starting out. It always is very helpful for me when they can like help shorten the process of what I need, what they need. So it
Yes.
may be, maybe they need something. I'm at a point where it's like, send me the link to, so I can just hop on and we can have this conversation and I can tell you what you need to know as someone who's just graduating or just, getting licensed. And so that's always very helpful. You just want
Yes,
to,
I had to learn that. I mean, that
right,
was a growing process for me. In the beginning, I didn't understand any of that dynamic. So also had to learn that as well. And you're right. If you prepare the document for somebody and say, here's what this is about, and here's why I came to this conclusion, you're going to
right.
get buy-in much faster than if you just say, well, I got this problem. I have no idea what to do. Can you just give me some pointers? They will give you pointers, but it won't necessarily help you build your own skill in terms of preparing others to make it easy for them to help you.
Right. Definitely. All of that definitely matters. Um, definitely matters. And then another thing you mentioned that I think is important, selling yourself throughout the process, which I'm learning that the sale is forever. I think it's indefinite. I think it's for the rest of our lives.
Forever. It is
when you
forever.
when are you in cruise control and you're just selling and just not selling but just relaxing, like on cruise control, just enjoying the process, and there's no need for the selling and pitching of yourself. I think I'm learning it's all the time, and of
When I
course,
when I get to that resting place where I can just sit back and let things come, I will let you know.
right, and I'm
Because
learning that.
I mean, in the corporate world, I spent 25 years there. So in the corporate world, it did get easier as I climbed the ladder. When I started my own business, though, I started over. I started from square one all over again.
Right,
So I think but as you grow and as you get experience and as you get more confident in your own ability,
Mm-hmm.
you start understanding the art of the sale, so to speak. And I'm not going to do the sales stuff because I'm still miserable at the sales stuff. That is still the one part of me that's still a finance person. The sale part is still hard.
Right.
Okay. But you understand, and this, you've heard me say this to you probably a million times already in our mentoring. I want you all, when you're selling, you always have to consider what the audience needs to hear, what the problem is that the audience has, and you insert the part of you that matches or solves that problem. So when you're selling yourself, when you are talking to another attorney, or when you're talking to a client, or when you're talking to a boss, you need to be thinking, okay, what does that person need
Right.
from me in order to make a decision?
Right.
So you are always going to be selling, but you're going to get fine tuning and experience in shortcutting to the things that are most important and recognizing and discerning what those things are faster as you gain more experience in business.
Yep. And I think that that's the truth, because I think I'm at a point, even personally, where you're just recognizing those things. What are they looking for? Refining my elevator pitch, right, or elevator speech, to just kind of hit on the things that's important, and then just letting everything just kind of go from there. And I think that has been good advice, because I think it's very effective. And then when time becomes of the essence, it all makes sense, because you don't have a lot of time to explain. You just need to make it short and sweet and just pack a powerful punch, right? And you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yes.
no, that's been something that we've been working on and that I have grown in, as well. And so We talk about this all the time, right? The last time we talked about that. We talked about that. So the time before
Self
that, we talked about
confidence. It really ends up to be all about self-confidence and all
right,
about you knowing yourself
right,
well enough to know what you can handle and what you can't. And it takes a lot to admit what you can and cannot handle, but it also, just in doing things, you start really getting comfortable with what you're willing to say and what you're willing to do. And I to this day, there's still some things, that I cringe when I have to ask for a sales price. I
mhm,
still do that. And I've been in business for myself now 20 years. Okay.
right, right,
But if someone asks me for help on, what is an ethical dilemma, or how do you solve a particular business problem that they're having, I have no problem pulling out of my toolbox, my mental and emotional and physical toolbox. Here are the things you need in order to be able to solve the problem. So it depends on the situation and who you're talking to. And I still get intimidated, believe it or not, by certain levels of people and certain ways of being. So, I think all of us are in a position to continue learning forever, and it's always going to be, you're always going to be selling some aspect of yourself that you want people to know.
right. One thing too, for those who are looking to climb the corporate ladder, from position to this, from one position to a higher position. I mean, I think it's constant. I think the way that I see it is every single day that you step into the office, or even in your presence in social media, or the conversations that you have outside of work, and of course with your with your coworkers, it's a constant sell. Like, would you agree to that? Like, was that your experience? Like, you had to present yourself, you know, in a professional way, or a way that demonstrated that you can handle a management position before you ever got the management position.
I was always thinking about how I was presenting myself. Always.
Right.
That was like from what I wore to when I got to the office to even the downtimes when we did happy hours after work and things like that. So this is all pre-COVID. In today's world, because we're also now remote and we've gone through 3 years of misery
Right.
where we sort of lost contact with each other in more intimate ways in terms of being in an office every day with people.
Right.
It you still do, like, if you notice, I'm wearing a suit and this is a Zoom session. Okay.
Right.
When I'm working, I am professionally dressed, at least business casual. I'm not ever going to do the sweatshirt thing or the casual holy jeans kind of thing. I'm always going to be dressed. I'm always going to have makeup on. I'm always going to present how I want to be presenting. Okay.
Mhm.
And I think that goes a long way to helping build your credibility. And when I'm on Zoom, I always have my camera on. I know a lot of people on Zoom like to have the camera off because they got stuff going on in the background. I always have my camera on because I want it, when I was in live in person, it was always an eyeball to eyeball, direct communication, body language communication. And I felt like that was really what helped me create the relationships, the professional relationships that I needed to build so that
Right,
I would be top of mind when somebody needed a particular service. So
right,
I do think you have to be aware of your reputation. You have to, be aware of how you come across. I when I interviewed, I there were positions when I had to interview for employees when I, had a certain level of power and decision making, where people would show up in holy jeans and messed up hair, looking like they literally had just crawled out of bed. Well, those people didn't get hired by me.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I do think you have to be alert for your reputation. The only thing that you really do control is your reputation and your way of communicating what it is that you want.
Right. I think that's excellent advice. I think a lot of millennials may actually struggle in this area because there's there's the millennials kind of clashing with the baby boomer era and the things and the tradition, right? And kind of
Hmm.
going against the tradition because I even experienced that in law in some ways,
Hmm.
right? There's the modern day lawyer who sweatshirts and a hoodie and you're going to a client appointment. And then there's one of the ways that we were taught. My professor said, don't show up like that. I will never hire you. Right.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of, a lot of that kind of finding balance, right? To where maybe we don't have to be as we were, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because a lot of industries have changed, although we haven't met the numbers that we should see. Um,
Yeah.
Changed in a sense of, maybe there's more women in the office. Maybe there's more diversity in the office, comes
Yes.
from cultures and everything. But I absolutely think this is very, very, very good to know. One of our guests said that she's strategic about, she likes wearing colored hair. So she's strategic as to when she wears her blue hair, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When she decides to just, be herself. So maybe for her, it's on vacation, or if she knows she's going on a meeting, she'll go to if she has a special meeting or appointment, she'll tuck in the blue hair or, or something.
And I think so. There's so many factors in this, and COVID has just done such a number on all of the norms that we knew before.
Right.
I am a baby boomer, okay? So I was taught you work till you're dead at your desk, okay? I
Right.
mean, that was what was ingrained in me. And now my inner child is coming out and I'm rebelling. I do not want to work till I die at my desk,
No,
right?
yes.
But there are just certain situations that require business etiquette. And
Yes.
so, in my view, if you wear professional dress and you conduct yourself professionally with a client, you are showing that client respect. If you
Absolutely.
show up on time, you are showing them respect. If you cancel meetings a lot, like at the last minute, that is
Yeah.
showing a lack of respect, right?
Right.
So we and COVID really relaxed so much of how we work together anymore and how we relate to each other that I think we're going to be relearning some of those business etiquette rules.
Right.
I'm okay with relaxing some things. I do a lot more Zoom meetings than I do in-person meetings still today. Okay. Where before COVID, I would meet you at a coffee shop. I would meet you at somebody's office. I would rather do an in-person meeting than a Zoom meeting.
Right.
So I do think that the rules are changing, and I need to relax a little bit, and some of the younger folks need to step it up a little bit so that we
Right,
do meet and compromise and meet in the middle as to where we're showing each other respect and
right,
where we're showing each other, the relationship is important to us.
right. No, I think all that is great. I think one of the conversations that I have, even with my mother, she goes, "You can never go wrong with modesty." And if
Yes.
you ever have to think about something, that means maybe you shouldn't, right? If you have to think twice or you have to ask for a second opinion, maybe you shouldn't. And so, no, I think that that's actually great advice for professionals, because I think you could never lose, right, if you show up in a traditional way, suited and booted, or professional, as as it has been done in tradition,
Hmm.
right? Because it works, and so I think you can never lose. I think trying to get on that, getting close to that gray line when you start kind of like mixing too much of the modern day, ways that are developing and that maybe that we're still trying out. Uh,
Yes. And I think that's where we start getting into the ethical dilemmas,
right,
right? Because then when you start graying that line and you start showing a lack of respect or a lack of um, what some people might perceive as a lack of honesty or integrity or
right,
even accountability. So that's where um, you start creating conflict for yourself.
right,
And so that's why, like, if I am unsure about things, that goes back to the conversation that we had about asking questions, right? Not assuming things. But we have to recognize that we do have a certain amount of control in how we come across, and that if people start distrusting us or if people start questioning our motives for things, it may be that we're sending some messages subliminally that we didn't intend either. So, I work a lot in ethics. I work a lot in the gray area, believe it or not. I try to bring color to ethics for that reason, right? But it's so important to understand that, like, the one thing that I have as a professional, particularly in accounting and in ethics, where there's so many questions and so many rules and so many areas to go wrong, the only thing I really truly have is my reputation, and I protect that, and I manage that, I cultivate that. I You could
right.
almost say, like, I water, weed, and feed my reputation. I want to make sure that it's
Wow.
always the best possible reputation that I can put forth.
No, I love that. I have to write that down. Water, weed, and
And
feed.
yeah.
Right. No, I love it because I mean I get it. I totally get it. So ethics, and that's one of the things that I enjoy with our conversations because ethical dilemmas are all around us. Conflict, ethical dilemmas, it's inevitable, right? And if you work in corporate, and especially if you work in entrepreneurship, every day is a you cross a potential ethic dilemma. And so
Hmm.
I think one thing that you do is help individuals to understand ethics because sometimes you may come face to face with an ethical dilemma and it may not even feel wrong to you at that moment, or
Hmm.
you may not even look at the broader picture of what the outcomes could be and who it might affect or how it might put you in a compromising situation. But part of what you do is, for one, you created a game, E Factor, right?
Hmm.
And
Yes.
part of what you do is that you host ethic training courses, coaching, which I think is fantastic because it's going to keep you out of trouble. And it's that's going to be that part of that watering, weeding, and feeding your reputation because, people start hearing some ethical dilemmas and circulating around your name and too many, it starts to look like a habit and more of a part of your character, which is not good. Um,
Right.
right?
It's so easy today to share misinformation and rumors and make it stick. Social media, all you have to do is have something posted and it's out there forever. And
Yes,
trying to get something off your social feed is
right.
nearly impossible. Not impossible, but it's hard. So, right. So I learned business ethics growing up in the corporate world. Okay. And I left the corporate world because people were asking me to do unethical things. And the higher I went up in the company, the worse the unethical requests became. Okay.
Right.
And so I learned that there's not always a company policy that tells you what to do. I learned that you have to have critical thinking and decision making skills. And sometimes you have to act fast. If somebody, and this is true, this is a true story, if somebody asks you to write a bribery check, how do you respond in that moment? Now, everyone knows that that's wrong, right? But if
Right.
someone asks you just to pretend that we didn't receive something or that we didn't acknowledge a mistake, is that an ethical dilemma? In my book, absolutely. But we don't teach people how to respond when your boss or someone in power that controls your destiny asks you to do something that you don't think is quite right. And on the flip side of this, I work with an ethics institute in town where there's one of the customers is doing a study on ethics in college, and a lot of younger folks don't actually fully understand what is an ethical dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are not doing a great job of teaching business ethics, what's the right thing to do, quote unquote. Every country has a different answer for what is the right thing to do. Every state of the union practically has a different answer on what is the right thing to do, depending on where you are and what you're doing. So we do need to understand that um, business ethics is part of your reputation. Being known as somebody that's trustworthy and accountable is
Mm-hmm.
gold. But we also we need to learn how to solve ethical dilemmas. There's no place that I know of where we teach that. So I created the game
Okay.
to put people into ethical dilemmas and create the safe space so you could practice saying no to the boss when he asks you to write a bribery check. Or you and your, with your clients, if one of your clients says, well, can you just ignore that piece of evidence? It's really not relevant. And it's like the one of the most important pieces of evidence for your
Right.
case.
Right.
Right? I give you practice in how to answer those questions and how to answer your client and how to protect your reputation, how to, if you have to report something that's illegal, how to do that. I become that mentor and that go-to source to help people actually practice solving the dilemmas and feeling good about it afterwards.
I think that that's excellent because I think that's a lot of what we need. Because sometimes, like I was saying, we don't know we need training in ethics until we start running into scenarios that puts us in a compromising situation. And I know you mentioned, your coworker may ask you to do something, but then you also have the boss, which sometimes it may feel right. Okay, well, the boss told me to do this, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
signs my paycheck at the end of the week. And I think
I
for
have
some
I
people, that may be a challenge.
Yeah, I have a 5-step process that I teach people, and it seems to be what everybody craves. It's 5 steps that actually people go through when they find themselves in a dilemma. The first thing is really to recognize you have an ethical dilemma. So if regardless who asks you, if it's your boss or if it's a coworker, if it's a family member or a friend,
Mhm.
right? The first step is understanding that there's an ethical dilemma. And how do you know it's an ethical dilemma? When your gut is saying, I don't like this. I mean,
Right.
that's the only way that I can describe for me how it feels when it's an ethical dilemma. It's just my gut and my mind, like my heart and my mind and my body, they were not aligned. There's something wrong, and it keeps me up at night. So once you know you're in an ethical dilemma, the next thing is to understand that you have choices. And most people, when they find themselves in a business ethical dilemma,
Mhm.
a lot of times we enter fear. We go into emotion. We get, oh my God, what's going to happen if I do what I think is the right thing to do? They're going to kill me. They're going to fire me. They're going to
Right.
punish me or whatever, right? So we have to put aside that emotion and we have to turn it into a problem solving exercise. So the first thing to do is, okay, what's the ethical dilemma and what choices do I have? And
Mhm.
from there, we evaluate who's involved, because if it's the boss, you're going to have a different answer than if it's a coworker or a family member or a friend. And we're also going to identify what are the consequences. And this is where I really teach, because a lot of my clients come to me after the dilemma has blown up and they don't know how to solve the problems, but they're faced with all the consequences. So I teach
Right.
in my game in safe space, if you write that bribery check or you falsify a document to the SEC or to the Department of Justice or to the courts or to your client or to the tax people, here's what could happen. Are you prepared for any of these, and are you willing to accept any of these consequences? If so, which one, right? So I kind of put it into the what's in it for me. And I make a game out of it because I want people to experience some of that, oh my God, I just got caught. Or, oh my God, I don't know the answer to this.
Right. That feeling,
or,
yeah.
You know, whatever. And then I want to have the safety of saying, okay, so it's just a game.
Right.
And then,
right.
and then the very last piece of the whole process is to take an action. You can choose to do nothing, Miss Ashley. You can choose to do nothing all day long. For many people, they view that as the safe answer. In many cases, that's the wrong answer. In many cases, that actually all it does is postpone the problem and the solution, and it makes the solution worse. So I encourage people to take action, even if it ends up being the wrong one, because moving forward, even just a baby step, is almost always better than doing nothing.
I can imagine for some people that's facing an ethical dilemma, one of their biggest concerns might be retaliation, right? So maybe they're weighing both sides, right? You know how you
Yes.
see, like in the cartoon, you have like the little devil on
Yes.
one
Got the
shoulder.
good devil, the bad devil, and they're both talking at the same time, and you can't make heads or tails out of it. Yes.
So that's what I see when we're having this conversation. But retaliation, though, like, I just told my boss no, or the retaliation. So do you think the solution is, you know, I think what we all maybe need to know is, how do you prevent maybe retaliation, or just be ready to pack up your desk and make a decision and stand
So all of the above and none of the above. No. So there are studies that actually have been done that actually say most people, more than 50% of people who see something unethical happening, will not report because they are afraid of retaliation or that nothing gets done. There are formal studies on this, okay? So that's why I created this 5 steps. And that's why I teach this, because remember I just said that I ask you to think about what choices you have. Well, one of the choices is report, and one of the
Right.
consequences is retaliation,
Right.
right? So I ask you to kind of figure out, it's sort of like a pros and cons list or a 9-box grid where you one element and you just kind of fishbone it out, or however you do your decision making. But you're right that a lot of people are afraid of retaliation. And if it's the boss doing it or asking for something unethical or illegal, or a client who pays you, right? We go to that fear place of, if I do this and I lose my job or I lose my client, I'll never find another one again. Right? And the reality is that's not true. Right. And all the times that I have done all of the, I mean, I think I've told you I'm on like cat life number 3 for all the ethical dilemmas and all the things that I've lived through in my corporate world and my business world.
Right.
I've never lost everything. I've never lost all the resources, all the clients. I've always found a job right away. Because again, I've built the reputation and I've built these skills and I've built the experience so that it's valuable to others besides me.
Okay.
So I think if you know of some unethical situation and you're afraid of retaliation, if you recall right in the beginning of our conversation, I said I had to learn how to ask questions and I had to learn how to choose the right people to ask for help. It's the same thing when you're reporting an ethical dilemma. You have to choose the right people to ask for help when you identify something that's unethical.
Right.
And many companies have a hotline, a whistleblower line, a mentor, a compliance office where you can go, or even HR. And I know that, I've heard all the things. Some people don't trust the HR. Some people don't trust the compliance because so I've heard all of those things too. But I encourage people to think about how to share the information and the concern of retaliation. Now, there's also all the horror stories of people who have been badly retaliated against. And I have some of those stories in my history as well. I've
Right.
been through that. Okay. So the fact of the matter is you always have a couple choices. Always. You always have a choice of doing nothing. You always have a choice of reporting. You always have a choice of asking a friend for help, like phone a friend, on all the talk shows or the game shows, phone a friend, right?
Uh-huh.
You also always have the risk of a retaliation or misinformation. You just know that those are part of the analysis you go through when you make the decision. At the end of the day, what helps you to make that decision is what you know in your heart is the right thing for you.
Okay.
There are laws. We have to follow the laws. There are ethics codes. We have to follow those. But if your boss is asking you to write a bribery check and you could lose your license if you do it, you know what the right answer is. It just takes a
Clear.
lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of soul searching, and it takes a call to me. Go, yeah, I can help you. I can support you. You know what I'm saying? Or to
Mhm.
another friend that can help you talk things over and look at the problem in a more rational sense.
But I love that. I love that you're available for people for that, because ethics is and conflict is inevitable. But you really do need someone that you can trust, someone that you can know that's experienced to help you through whatever you're experiencing. So I definitely love that you're there for professional women with a lot of good experience, and that you can help. Like, hey, this happened to me today, or how should I handle this? Should I say something? I mean, I think that's a lot of it. Like you said,
I
sometimes
do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of business coaching. I rescued several businesses who have been stolen from the spouse or from
yeah,
somebody trusted, right? I have this, I've told you the story. I've had a gun pointed at my head because I took away
yeah,
girls and power and money. And so like I've been through everything from baseball bats being thrown at my head to people following me home to all of it, and
right.
I'm still here.
So I don't think it's fair to the audience, because when you mentioned it to me, I'm like, what? You had a gun pulled to your head? You have, like, just keep it brief, but just give us a
Okay.
synopsis of
Well, I don't want to
you
scare your
mentioned it.
audience away. I don't want to scare everybody away. But yeah, so I was in a foreign country,
Uh-huh.
but it was a U.S. company. They sent me overseas to be the accounting person, and someone trusted me enough to come to me and inform me that one of the leadership team had killed some girls or killed some people. It wasn't girls. It was killed some people. Was raping the girls on the plant, um, and was stealing money from the company and started a business and was then selling service back to the company. And so this brave soul that came to me said, "This is your job as the finance director. What are you going to do to fix this?" Right? That was my first major ethical dilemma.
Mhm.
So I know that none of you are going to have that kind of ethical dilemma. So everything that you go through is much less scary than that. But at that moment in time, you know, there was no handbook. There was no person to turn to. There was just me and my informant who was scared to death asking me for help. And so I went and I gathered facts. I talked to the girls. I learned roughly between 4 and 500 girls had been raped at age 18, and most of them were single mothers. I learned at least $1 million a year was missing for a long time. I had some newspaper clippings and things like that that proved that this individual had indeed killed a couple of people. And so I took all that fact to headquarters. We created a plan. We implemented the plan, and the folks that were doing the bad deeds figured out that I was the one person that had all that information and that I was likely to be the informant. And so someone followed me home one night from the plant and basically pointed a gun at my head. trying to threaten me to not do any more damage to them.
Right.
And I'm still here. So I got out of that situation by whatever higher power you believe in. But that was my first real experience with unethical people and unethical behavior and understanding in my moment of time what I would and would not stand for.
So that I would say that was before your game was created, which was
That was
perfect
that,
for your
that was the
reason.
beginning. Yeah, that was the seed for me creating the game years later.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very interesting story and happy, that you are here with us today. Definitely on the extreme end of things. So I think any ethical issue that you deal with when it's, comes to telling someone no, it seems very simple in comparison to what you dealt with.
Yeah,
And
and here's the thing. I don't want to scare people into not reporting. Every ethical dilemma creates a conflict, right? I want you to think back to ethical dilemmas in your life and your audience. I want each of you to think of your latest ethical dilemma. Somebody asked you to do something that made you uncomfortable. How do you solve that problem? How do you balance and align yourself so that you can sleep at night, right? That
right,
was ultimately the question that I had to answer for myself that
right,
allowed me to decide what I was going to do. Because when I was told all that information by the informant, I knew I could actually be at risk of being killed.
right.
And I still had to make that decision. That was the ethical dilemma. Really, do I report this or do I stay silent? And I think all of us have that ethical dilemma as the first one.
Right. Right. No, I think that is excellent advice, and I'm happy that we were able to touch on ethics. But moving on, because we only have a few more minutes, but I want to ask you a few more questions because there's just so much that you have, and this is what we do, you guys. We start and it just goes on and on and on. One thing leads to another, and it's like, oh yeah, let me tell you what happened this day, and then we just ravel, we just go on and on and on. But the conversation is always really, really good and very so much to learn and gain and very rewarding. Because I think the last time we talked, we did 2 hours, right? I think we did 2 hours.
We
So
did 2 hours. Yep.
right, and
You
we're
you
just
needed
enjoying
you there was so much we needed to do.
right,
So, yeah.
right.
I won't cut you off if it's really that important.
Okay. No, we definitely enjoy each other's company a lot and enjoying this interview as well. But there's one question that I have to ask for our audience because I think it's important for them to know, especially with someone of your experience and expertise. What should every entrepreneur know before starting a business?
The things I wish I had known.
Yes, I know.
Um, the first one is that entrepreneurship is hard. Okay.
It
It's not like just getting a job. You have to create all the rules for your business. So you have to be passionate, absolutely, completely passionate about what you're doing. You have to recognize you're going to have to work for your client and understand your client. You need to have cash or cash flow before you spend it. My favorite question to my coaching clients that are starting businesses is how many products do you have to sell to pay for that item you want to buy? And if it's one or two, then okay, go ahead and make that purchase. If it's 100 or 1,000, you need to really think about, is it going to add value to your business? I think you also need to truly understand what problem you are solving for your customer and who your ideal customer is. That took me a long time to
right,
actually identify what my niche was, what I wanted. And I hate when people ask, well, what's your niche? Instead, what I'd rather people to ask is, what problems are you solving in the world?
right,
That helps you then determine, and it helps your client self-select, oh, that's something that I have a problem with, so I want to talk to Marcy or not, right? So I think understanding your product or service and what problem it's solving and being able to articulate that quickly, so that people can opt in or opt out, I think that's like really, really critical to the success of your business. And you need to have patience. You're going to get a million no's before you get the first yes.
right, right. And that's
And
always, go ahead.
I had to learn that. I had to learn how to take no for an answer.
Right. I think all that is great. I think all that is great. I think you touched on the finances. I think you touched on understanding who your target is. You can't sell to everyone, and that's okay. You don't need everyone to be successful.
Mhm.
Understanding your target. We talk about customer persona, right? Developing that person. Who do they look like? What do they enjoy? What age group are they in? Just identifying that, and then also um, and be ready for the no's because they're coming. But in that, right, the reward is you go back to the drawing board, you tweak what you have to tweak, you learn. Sometimes it's always a blessing to get a no and an explanation as to why, and sometimes you have to
Yes.
take initiative and ask for the why. Well, why no? So then I can take
Yes.
that with me and learn and grow from that no, so then I don't keep getting no's, but the
Yes.
yes is coming. Right. And understanding what solution you're solving, I think is very important. Right.
Yeah. I wrote a little blog article called Getting to Know, and it was after me trying to land a very big client and them not returning my phone calls for 6 months. After loving, they said, I love what you're doing. I want to work with you. Let's talk about working and training our people, blah, blah, blah. I heard all the beautiful things that every person wants to hear as an entrepreneur. And then when it came time to actually get the contract signed and start working, they never called me back again. So my last phone call was, I'm giving you permission to say no, but I just want an answer either way, either a yes or a no. And if it's no, it's okay. I just will keep bothering you and calling you every week until I get an answer one way or another.
Right.
You have to have some persistence and some tenaciousness as well, by the way. That's another thing I would tell entrepreneurs who are starting. And so that voicemail message that I left that said it's okay to say no actually prompted the phone call. So I took away the embarrassment, and the person said, we loved what you did, but management decided to go a different direction, and I didn't know how to tell you that.
Right.
So, yes, getting to know and getting to accept a no answer and learning what the no was about. It wasn't anything that I had done. It was just some decisions had been made by somebody outside of the group that I was working with.
Right. And one of my favorite sayings is rejection is redirection. So the immature, it's just sending you in a different direction to get to the person or the place or the yes that you need to get to. So rejection is redirection.
That's
Um,
right.
so Miss Marcy, how can we get in touch with you?
So you can take a look at my website, which is businessethicscoach.com, www.businessethicscoach.com.
Okay.
I think I've given you my email. You can email me at marcy@coacheuc.com. We'll put that,
Okay.
out on in the interview with you. Um, and
Thank
yes, you can reach out to me on that website, or even you can look me up on LinkedIn.
you. Okay.
And yeah, you can see my full bio, and you can try to guess which of the companies I experienced all my trauma.
Sounds good. Well, we are going to list that information in the caption for those of you who are interested. It sounds like the website is your most central place, as well as your LinkedIn might also be good options to connect with you. But thank you so much for being a part of our guest, being one of our guests for this show. Like I said, you guys, we can go on and on and on and on and on because there's still so much more that she's mentioned that I definitely want to dive in. So we're definitely going to have to look forward to having you back on as a guest to just talk about some of these other things that I know that you bring and you offer that we weren't able to talk about. But to our audience, thank you so much for joining us again at Balance or Hustle Live. Never miss an episode of Balance or Hustle Live by subscribing to our YouTube channel, which the link is in the bio. It's Balance or Hustle TV at YouTube. And thank you so much. Until the next time, remember to create, grow, and enjoy success. Thank you.